Good morning. My name is Phil Craven. I'm the station chaplain at the Defence Academy in Craven. Our reading this morning is found from 1 Kings chapter 19 at verse 15. The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you are there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king over Israel. And anoint Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel Meholah to succeed you as prophet." So Elijah went from there and found Elisha son of Shaphat. He was ploughing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye," he said, "and then I will come with you." "Go back," Elijah replied. "What have I done to you?" So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the ploughing equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and became his servant. Amen. I led a church in Glasgow for many years and I absolutely loved it. It was my first church, so I was so enthusiastic and keen. I set up new groups and outreach work, clubs, you name it, I did it. And people used to say how wonderful it was and how they wouldn't be able to cope if I ever did leave. And I began to believe them. But then sadly the day came when it was my turn to leave. And I told the congregation there was wailing and gnashing of teeth, as you would expect. And the unfortunate thing for me is that most of what I had set up relied upon me to do it. And there was no obvious successor. And to be honest, I was secretly pleased that there was no successor, because when I left, all my work would stop and then the congregation would realise just how important I really was. And even though I'm a Baptist minister in a Baptist church, I was sure they would make me into the first Baptist saint for all my work. As I was preparing my last few weeks, a very odd thing happened. A number of new families suddenly appeared at the church. They had the skills that I had, and they could do all the things that I did, and they could do it even better than me. So on my last Sunday, instead of being able to boast about how invaluable I was, I realised humbly that the work of the Lord is more important than the pride of a pastor. The work of the Lord will always continue forward, often despite our best efforts. In our passage today, we come across the great prophet Elijah. God has told him to find a successor, to take on the ministry. And as he wanders the desert regions, he spots someone in the distance, working in the fields with his ox and plough. This was Elisha. He was from a wealthy family. And Elisha had a lot to lose by becoming Elijah's successor. So Elijah comes up to Elisha and throws his cloak around him, and immediately Elisha knows that he's been called to follow as a prophet. That was like the Masonic handshake of the day. When you had the experience, you knew you were in the club. What's odd is that we don't get to hear the interaction between Elijah and Elisha. All it says in verse 19 is that Elijah threw his cloak around Elisha. The next thing we see is Elisha running after Elijah. It makes you wonder if Elijah just threw his cloak around Elisha and then legged it to get as far away as he could, like some kind of game of tig. But then Elijah was a bit socially awkward. So how does Elisha cope with this intrusion into his life? He wasn't expecting Elijah to turn up. He was just getting on with his own business, doing his own thing. Then this crazy random man shows up, throws his coat at him, and then legs it. Elisha recognized that he had been anointed as the successor for Elijah. So he makes plans to leave and to follow. He takes his oxen and he kills them. He takes his plough and he burns it. Now you might be thinking, this sounds a bit familiar to the story in Matthew's Gospel, where Jesus told someone to follow him. The man replied, "Let me first bury my father." And Jesus criticizes the man for not coming immediately. So was Elisha just procrastinating? No. Elisha was making absolutely sure that he would have no temptation to ever come back. He was quite literally destroying his old way of life to begin a new one. He would not ever be coming back. I think this message speaks to each of us today. Each of us have things that we keep going back to, that we just can't move on from. I wonder what is distracting you today, what you are finding it difficult to move on from. I wonder what it is that you are perhaps returning to that is breaking you and damaging you over and over again. I wonder what you do that stops you perhaps from deepening your relationship with Jesus. We all have things in life that we just can't leave behind. And all these things affect our relationship, not just with God, but with each other. For you, it might be an addiction that you just can't leave behind because it's your crutch when life gets hard. For you, it might be a destructive relationship that you won't leave because even though it's horrendous, it's the only thing you know. For you, it might be a hate or a grudge that you can't and won't allow to settle because the hate has sustained you for so long. For you, it might be a deep shame or pain or guilt that you hide in the deep recesses of your heart because you think that no one could ever love you if they fully knew the truth. For you, it might be your own pride that you just can't leave behind because you like feeling invaluable. Or it may be a loss that you have been unable to move on from. It might be any number of things. But the point of Elisha's story is that he burned the things of the past so that he could not ever be tempted to go back to his previous way of life. And maybe that is the challenge for each of us today. Perhaps you need to remove once and for all that thing that you keep returning to that only brings you pain and brokenness and shame. The thing that continually breaks you and those around you. That thing which is stopping you from getting closer to Jesus. And so Elisha and Elijah set off on their journey together. They knew that whatever they would face it together. And that is the point of the church. We deal with challenges in life together. We assure and reassure each other together. We support each other together. Elisha literally burned his bridges so that he could not go back to his old way of life. There was only one way, and that way was forward. That's the challenge for each of us today. Amen.